Alright, let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 10 worst episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise. In this video, I will get into my number one absolute worst episode of the entire Star Trek franchise, spanning over 500 episodes long. So, this video is part of a series of videos where I count down all 10 of what is, in my opinion, the worst episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise. I do a video for each episode in the list. If you would like to check out my list, you can check the description below. There is a playlist, a link to the playlist that has all the episodes in my top 10. So here we are. My number one worst episode of the entire Star Trek franchise is Prophet and Lace. Prophet and Lace. So this episode is episode number 23 of season 6 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. One of the best seasons of all of Star Trek, really, not just Deep Space Nine. And it's got the worst episode in it anyway. So those who are familiar with my channel and quite observant may have known that I actually mentioned it, that I think this is the worst episode of the entire Star Trek franchise before. So maybe you predicted that this would be my number one. So, unlike with Turnabout Intruder, I'm actually going to push all the gender politics thing aside, and I'll get to that last. Mainly because I want people to know that that's not the only reason why I hate this episode. I mean, it's a good reason, and that combined with everything I'm about to go to is why I think it's the absolute worst of the entire Star Trek franchise. Absolute worst. But it's not the main reason. There's a lot more I hate about this episode. And the biggest offense, and to be honest, this is kind of almost like the representative of all Ferengi episodes in Deep Space Nine. And there's a few exceptions. One notable exception is the Magnificent Ferengi, but this, which is one of my, it made my top, I believe my top 30 favorite, or maybe even top 20 best episodes of Deep Space Nine. And I think it's the funniest episode of the entire Star Trek franchise. And funnily enough, that was also in season 6. And that was the Ferengi episode that preceded this Ferengi episode. They even referenced it in this episode. And I think it's funny because watching these episodes, I really think that this episode, Prophet and Lace, is like the exact polar opposite of the Magnificent Ferengi. Because in the Magnificent Ferengi, to me, all the characters just gelled. All of the jokes landed. It was just joke after joke after joke, which were all funny. And the way the comedic timing in that episode was perfect. The way the actors played off each other was perfect. It was one of the funniest comedies I've ever seen. Not just Star Trek. I mean, it is a generally funny episode. And I do think it is the funniest comedy episode that Star Trek has ever done. Where this was the exact opposite. Where none of the jokes land. It was just joke fell flat after flat after flat. The characters had no chemistry. It seemed like the actors did not really know what they were doing. They did not agree, which is of course what I read in the behind the scenes stuff. And it was a horribly written script, first of all. It was an absolute dreadful script. Now, let me address this first, because this is a common thing. I've done a lot of research on behind the scenes stuff, and this there's this statement I read where it says the cast and crew, so the actors and the writers, they pretty much agree that the reason why this episode failed and didn't work was because of the way it was directed and the mashing tones. So let me make this clear. So this episode was directed by Alexander Siddig, who plays Dr. Bashir, and he read the script and didn't really find it funny and wanted to play it more as a serious drama. Armin Shimmerman, who plays Quark, also agreed with this viewpoint, that it should be played as more of a serious drama. So they shot the episode as a serious drama, but the writers, and I believe this is written by the main writers who write most episodes, Ira Stephen Bear and Renee Echevarria. I'm gonna get his name right one of these days. Anyway, they apparently thought this is the funniest thing ever. They was like, oh my god, this script is the best script ever. It's so hilarious. In fact, even Michael Piller told them that this was going to be a classic episode, and Ira Stephen Bear was certain that this would be the funniest, the best, the crowning achievement in Ferengi episodes. Yeah, I don't know what the hell they were smoking or ingesting or injecting into their veins that made them believe that script was actually in any way, shape, or form good, let alone great. Now, here's the thing. So, as I said, the cast and crew, the writers and the actors, like Alexander Siddig, apologized in the convention, said it's probably my fault for directing this all seriously and it just mashing tones. And the writers, there's some scenes that they made them shoot again, and there's other scenes where I can tell that were acted like in a sort of more serious tone, but they try to make it more lighthearted in post-productions by putting on this silly music that dun 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 dun, which mismatches with the acting. So the writers and the actors all agree that the reason why this episode is terrible is because it has a mismatch of tones, because no one on set could agree on what the tone of this story should be. And apparently a lot of people involved, such as the actress who plays Mookie, or Ishka if you prefer, and Amron Shimmerman and other actors involved, said it was a very tough shoot, and that it was very messy and people didn't really agree with the tone, so they contribute that to why this episode failed. So let me make something very crystal clear, and let me reassure all the writers and actors who I know watch my channel. No, kidding, but everyone out there who watched this episode and is involved in making this, let me, as the godlike figure I am, just reassure you and just state once and for all, like objectively and just written in stone, basically. I'll just lay out the law for you. Let me assure you that is definitely 100% not the case. This episode actually was terrible in script form. It was terribly written. It doesn't matter how the fuck you direct it. You could have like the best comedy director out there who's like, oh, this is the funniest script. And he saw eye to eye with the writers and thought this was hilarious and directed exactly how they wanted it. You could have had like a smooth shoot where all the actors got along, and this episode would still suck because it is a terrible idea. Alright, so I mean, granted, part of the reason why some of these jokes don't land is because you could really tell that the actors weren't feeling it. Like, the delivery is not there. But here's the thing. The reason why the actors were not feeling it is because it's not funny! Like, the words they're giving to say, what's on the page, what's on the script, it's not funny. Now, I know that humor is an objective thing. Subjective, sorry. Humor is a very subjective thing, and I will never argue that. But there's many subjective art form mediums where you can objectively say, well, this was not executed very well. For example, The Room. It's an obvious go-to example that is not a well-written script by any objective viewpoint. So you can, to some degree, say definitively that something just... it's not funny. Now, to be fair, and it's just like every episode that appears in my worst list, there is a group of people who will be like, what are you talking about? This episode's great. And if you take enjoyment from watching this episode, like, fine, but, that's just in a minority opinion. And I guess people can like horrible things, even unironically. Like The Room, people like it because they like to make fun of it. But some horrible movies, people can like unironically and actually say, hey, I think that's great as is. Like the Transformers movies, for example. But anyway, God, what a mess this movie is. Anyway, unironically, I'm making fun of it for being terrible to say, hey, I think it's good as... yeah. So, everyone can like anything. But, I think by any, like, sort of academic or craft perspective on what is good written comedy? What is a good written comedy script? Like, there's some, like, examples of, like, really tight, great comedy. Like, The Magnificent Ferengi, just earlier this season, is just like, like, that is a great script. It's helped by the fact it was acted and directed so well. But on its form, on the page, just looking at the words, it is a really good script. You feel the character interaction, the wit behind it, all these actors are good. Let me make this very clear. Like, Armin Shimmerman is an amazing actor. He's one of the best. The Max, what's his face, who plays Rom, is also good. Even though I don't like Nog, the actor who plays him, amazing actor. So all these actors, especially Wallace Shawn, you got Wallace fucking Shawn, who wasn't even in The Magnificent Ferengi because of schedule issues. He's in this piece of shit. But these are all great actors. So when you have an episode that has all these great actors and it falls flat, it's not the actor's fault. I'm sorry, I don't care what the fuck happened on set. I don't care if they saw eye to eye or the director gave them wrong direction or whatever. You have these great actors and you turn out this unfunny piece of shit. I am sorry, that is the fault of the script. Because when you gave him a good script, like in The Magnificent Ferengi, they fucking knock it out of the park. I mean, their comedic timing between those actors, Armin Shimmerman, Max, and Aaron Eisenberg, I think his name is, like, it's just on point. It's just like perfect. They like feed all in Jeffrey Combs as well. They just nail it. They just have like such... Jeffrey Combs is an amazing actor. And they just have such great comedy when they're given a good script. The script for this episode sucks! And here's the thing. Speaking of Jeffrey Combs, I've heard some reviews I was reading say, oh, Jeffrey Combs is the only good thing about this episode. He's great. He's an amazing actor. I think he is one of the best. I even said that in the video I did. I think he is one of the best actors ever to appear in the Star Trek universe. But he's not good in this episode because it's not his fault. Again, it's the script. Like the shit that Brunt says. Like, it's just so stupid. How pitiful. I mean, it reminds me of like cartoons, like really bad ones that are just not written well or meant to be taken seriously. Alright, so let's get into some of the jokes. Acting Grand Nagus Brunt. So there's a reoccurring joke, if you can even call it a joke. Like, it's like the writers were trying to will this to be funny. It's like, alright, if we repeat this enough, it's gonna be funny. Let's just keep doing it over and over again, and we'll force people to laugh at it. Like, okay, so every time someone mentions Grand Nagus Brunt, someone else has to say acting Grand Nagus Brunt, because he's just the acting Grand Nagus. And they repeat that over and over and over and over again, and it never gets funny. It's like, why they keep saying acting? Is that supposed to mean something? That he's just the acting Grand Nagus. So, he's the acting Grand Nagus. Why does people make a point to point it out every single time? It's not fucking funny. And then, yeah, again, like the Brunt shows up. Like the whole point, like I like Jeffrey Combs, as I said, but I do not like Brunt. Never liked Brunt. I don't give a fuck about Brunt. And this is something my brother pointed out on his channel, that Brunt is totally inconsistent from episode to episode. One episode he's a total asshole. One episode he wants to kill Quark. Next episode he's friendly, he wants to help Quark. And now he wants to destroy the Grand Nagus. Like, he is one of the most inconsistent characters. And that's probably one of the reasons why I just don't give a fuck about him. I just never found him funny. Well, Magnificent Frankie aside, because that episode's just a masterpiece. But other than that, I never found him funny. I just don't care about him. And so, when they have the stakes of this episode that, Brunt's gonna become Grand... And plus, how fucking inconceivable... Did that on purpose. How inconceivable is it that Brunt could become Grand Nagus? Because, alright, let me remind you of the Ferengi timeline, which I'm sure you don't remember, because who gives a fuck about these Ferengi episodes? But anyway, let me remind you of the Ferengi timeline. So this, as I mentioned, takes place in Season 6, shortly after Magnificent Ferengi. Now, in that episode, Brunt wasn't even a member of the FCA. He lost his membership. I think it had to do with the pre-Season 5 episode where he tried to outsmart Zek, who was having an affair with Ishko, whatever bullshit. I didn't care about that episode either. All these Ferengi episodes suck. But anyway, so Brunt was exiled. He was kicked out of the FCA. And then in this episode, which takes place, several months later, he's not only rejoined the FCA because he helped rescue Ishka, so Zek did him a favor, which they point out in this episode. But not only has he rejoined the FCA, but according to his words, he bribed his way back to a position of power in order to become, and he's the person they went to in order to take over for Grand Nagus when Zek was kicked out. Bullshit! You want to know the real reason why Brunt was the choice to become Grand Nagus after Zek was born down? Because he's a fucking reoccurring character. Because we know who he is. That's the only reason. Because it's Jeffrey Combs. That's the only reason. It is so contrived. It is so damn contrived. It is so unbelievable. And when they said this, like, I'm the acting Grand Nagus. No, you're not. You were fucking kicked out of the FC. You're not the acting Grand Nagus. Get the fuck out of here. And so, when the whole stakes of the episode is, Brunt's gonna become the Grand Nagus and make everyone poor and destitute. You know what my reaction to that is? I don't give a fuck! That is my reaction to that. Also, there's lines towards the end of the episode, which don't worry, I'm going to get into this whole sex change thing shortly. But there's lines at the end of the episode where Brunt keeps saying, that's a man, and his name is Quark. And I even read some reviews where people are like, okay, this episode sucks, but that's funny. It's not. The way he delivers it is so... I'm sorry, I love Jeffrey Combs, but the way he delivers it it's just so... It's just so poor. It's just so cliche. It's so stereotypical. Oh, that's not a man, he's Quark. And it's a bad delivery, it's a bad line, it's a bad, everything about this is fucking terrible. Now, let me talk about one scene in particular, which was a point of contention that they did actually have to reshoot, because Armin Shimmerman and Alexander Siddig both agreed that this should be played seriously, so they shot it seriously, and the showrunner saw it in the dailies and was like, oh my god, no, you're supposed to shoot it funny, so they made him reshoot it. And this is the scene where Quark's mother, Mookie, or Ishka, has that argument with Quark, and they're yelling at each other, and Quark is like, gets right up in her face, and it's like saying her how she ruined the Ferengi. She's the worst thing that ever happened to the Ferengi Alliance. And she's like, well, you know what you are? You are. And he's like, oh, what? And then she like goes and falls over and collapses. Now, let me make something very clear. This episode is so terrible, there's no way it could possibly be saved, as I said, without seriously, like, no, actually, you can't even, if you have to rewrite the script where it's not even recognizable as the same episode, so basically you can't save this episode. But I very much agree with Armin Shimmerman and Alexander Siddig here. I think the way that they actually played it in this reshoot, although granted I didn't see how they played it originally, just read about it, but judging by this reshoot, what we actually see what the showrunners wanted, is so goofy and over the top and fucking ridiculous. I can imagine a scenario if they played this scene seriously, and Armin Shimmerman talked about it, how they played it like it was their unresolved issue between son and mother, and how it was actually tragic that the son wouldn't really listen to her, and she felt neglected, and that she had like a heart attack during this fight. I could see them doing that working in a serious way, but in this way where she makes this silly face and goes, that's just so stupid. And it's contrived writing, extremely contrived writing, just so they could have this stupid plot where, because the stupid Sluggo Cola guy was going to meet with Ishka, so they need to have a reason for her to not be able to take the meeting, so Quark can get it. Now, I actually think if they played it in a serious way, that would have worked into the episode. But as is, it's just like, I don't buy it. It's so goofy and silly and stupid. It's just, I don't buy this would happen. And then the following scene where Bashir, his behavior, this is not Bashir. This is terrible writing for Bashir. Bashir would not act like this, where like, and it was done, again, contrived so they could have this joke that's not funny, where Zek and Ram and all them are like blaming Quark for Ishka and having a heart attack or whatever she had, and Quark is like, it's not my fault, I didn't do anything wrong, and Bashir comes out and is like, actually just keep him away from her, because I don't know what he did, but she kept saying it's all Quark's fault, so just keep him away from her. And everyone looks at Quark like, urgh. And Bashir wouldn't act like that. That is very unprofessional. He wouldn't be like, oh, well, she keep him away because he did something nasty, because he kept saying it's all Quark's fault. Out of character. And it's not funny! No! Nothing about it is funny. So, drink Sluggo Cola, the slimest cola in the galaxy. Let's get into that. So, that's not funny either. And I just said it as a joke. But, they had all these jokes in here about how the Ferengi like to eat disgusting things. Like, Quark or Nimba, whatever her name is, he says later that, you could market it towards women because it will keep your teeth green. And earlier, Ishka was just like, oh, give me some 2 grubs and suck out the 2 grubs. And here they're like, ooh, they're drinking slug cola that has all this algae in it. Ooh, isn't that disgusting? Isn't it funny how disgusting the Ferengi are? No. Not really. I mean, they're an alien race. I mean, Klingons eat gach, which moves in and looks really gross to us. They try to make... Is that funny? No. They never try to play that out for laughs. They actually try to illustrate the disgusting or just how it's different. Now, humans would find it disgusting, but that's because it's just different cultures. So the Ferengi are different. They're aliens from a different world, and so they evolve differently, and so their taste buds, of course, are different, and they like eating insects and 2 grubs and have algae-based cola. Ha 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 ha! It's not funny! It's not funny! And again, kind of like the acting Grand Nagus thing, they keep repeating it over and over. Ooh, the slimy cola, sluggo cola. Ooh, have a sluggo. And the guy comes up, it's like, have a sluggo cola. Here's a cola for you, here's a cola for you. Yeah, I'm sure CEO of cola companies go around with a bunch of the product and just handing it out to everyone they fucking meet. I'm pretty damn sure this is not how that works. And, most important thing, it is not funny! Alright. I've avoided it now, so okay. Alright, before I get into the sex change, let's talk about the sexual harassment. And this is what all that stuff I talked about makes this one of the worst episodes of the franchise. But you add in all this very offensive and disgusting gender politics, that's what really pushes this to the worst episode. Now, and as I said, it's representative of this whole Ferengi thing, which was never good. But this is its absolute lowest. But anyway, sexual harassment. So, at the start of this episode, they have this, intro thing, whatever you call it, teaser, I suppose some people call it. I don't know. I never liked the term, but anyway, that's the official term, I guess. But you have the teaser where Quark is talking to this Daba girl that works for him. That's very attractive, and he's just like, "Oh, everyone likes you. The waiters like you. Rom likes you. The customers like you. Other Daba girls like you. Everyone likes you." And she's like, "Oh, that's so great." He's like, "But there's one person you're not very nice to." And she's like, "Oh, who?" He's like, "Me." He's like, "Why am I not nice to you?" It's like, "You could be nice to me." And suggests that she read a book about how to give umaks in order to perform umaks on him. And then he goes as far to suggest that if she doesn't, he would fire her. And he's like, "Well, I have the power to fire you if you're not nice to me." And she's very taken aback. She's like, "You wouldn't." He's like, "I would." And so, she's interrupted by Ram or whatever. And so, what is umaks? Well, here's the thing about umaks. I think that the Star Trek franchise has been really inconsistent on exactly how they portray umaks. So, according to Memory Alpha, umaks was the act of massaging a Ferengi's ears or lobes. There was no translation for the word because the Ferengi ear was a major erogenous zone. Massaging the ears caused extreme pleasure and relaxation. So it's an erogenous zone. So what does the word erogenous mean? Well, it means a part of the body sensitive to sexual stimulation. Now, the way that they always play umaks in Star Trek is it's like a hand job. Pretty much. I mean, that's how the actors played. The actors played as if they're being sexually stimulated. They're like, ooh, ooh. They play it like that. And they often talk about how they really want women to give them umaks. And Ron one time was talking about how he was giving himself umaks, which is obviously a metaphor for masturbation. So, yeah, it is essentially a hand job. Now, granted, the show is entirely very inconsistent with this because they often have women will just jump on Ferengi and give them umaks when they want to coerce them into doing something. Like Jadzia did this to Quark when she wanted him to take part of her stupid trill ritual. And Beverly Crusher did this to the Ferengi Solox, Han Solox, the smuggler. And when they did that to Solok when they wanted to ride on the ship, she started, umaks. I think Vosh did that to Quark when she wanted to. So, I mean, would Jadzia just start giving someone a hand job in the middle of a public space if she wanted to coerce them into doing something? I mean, so they've been inconsistent with this, but I mean, the way they play it, it is somewhat equivalent, and particularly the way this scene is phrased. The way Quark, I mean, as I said, the way he spells it out, it's like, you're nice to everyone, you're a great employee, but you gotta give me umaks or I'm gonna fire you. That is clear-cut sexual harassment. Even if you try to argue, well, maybe umaks is more like giving someone a back massage rather than a hand job, which I mean, I could accept the argument that maybe is somewhat in between those two things, but I would say, especially the way the actors play it and the way the context of it is a lot closer to the hand job than it is to a back massage. And even though, let's say, for example, it was a back massage and Quark is like, I'm going to fire you unless you give me a back massage. That's still sexual harassment. So, I mean, but it's even worse in the context of the umaks, which is clearly has a sexual connotation to it. So, now, here's the thing about this. I got several things. Okay, so first thing is, this is another example of what I'm talking about, where a specific example of where the scene was actually shot very seriously, as it should, because Quark is being. This is a serious. Like, if you had watching any other film where there's a boss who is sexually harassing, like, if it was a decent film, they play it as like a dark thing. Like, the guy is being a total asshole and a total dickhead, so that it would be a serious, dark thing that they would be portraying, that this is a bad situation for this woman who's stuck in the situation. They play it as a dramatic thing, and the guy would rightfully be played as the villain. But is that how this episode plays it? No. It plays it with lighthearted, silly comedy, dun 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 dun, and they even play like comedy music at the end of the scene. They're like, oh, isn't that funny? Isn't that so hilarious? Quark wants to sexually harass his employee. Ha 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 ha. Again, I think Alexander Siddig read this episode and was like, that's a dark scene, so I'm going to feel it in a dark way. And he told Armin Shimmer, he's like, you're absolutely right. He is sexually harassing her. This is a very dark shit. So they went and filmed it. And the showrunners took in the edit and was like, no, fuck this. We want it funny. So they just threw this comedic music over top of it and like, dun, 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 dun. Which, again, is a huge mismatch of themes. But alright, several things. First of all, even if the actors did play it comedically, it would still be a mismatch of things. Even if they came in like, I'm going to sexually harass you. It's still, that's not funny. Sexual harassment is not funny. So it would still be a mismatch of things regardless. Second thing, Alexander Siddig and Armin Shimon read it the correct way. It's a serious, dark shit. It should be played as Quark as the villain. He's the total asshole. He's in the complete wrong here. I've heard the argument before that this is actually a true portrayal of what Ferengi are like, and this is how Quark should behave. I'm willing to accept that, but I personally, I think that Quark has grown a lot throughout this. I mean, this was season 6 we're talking about here. He has progressed a lot in his character development. He's become, as much as he hates to admit it, he's become less Ferengi-like and more Federation-like. And that's a part of his character is that he does hate to admit it. But it's true. I think one of my favorite episodes of season 5 is a Quark episode. What's it called? Business as Usual. And that showed his progression most of all of how he wanted to be this Ferengi who's all about it. He cared about his profits, but he has a conscience. Like it or not, his conscience got the better of him, and he cared about what people in the station like Dax and others thought of him. So that Quark who's progressed, who cares about other people, and particularly knows that people like Dax and Sisko and O'Brien wouldn't tolerate that sort of shit. He wouldn't do that. He evolved beyond that. I think maybe this would be typical for a typical Ferengi, but I think Quark is definitely evolved beyond just being a typical Ferengi, so I would say it's out of character for him. Second thing I gotta say, I was just rewatched the scene from season 1 episode, I think it was Captive Pursuit. And they had the very first scene, had this scene with a Dabo girl who went to Cisco, and it's Quark is suggesting, and it's funny because I didn't never realize when I watched the scenes, because every time they're about to say, either the woman or Cisco is about to say the word sex, they're interrupted. It's kind of like the thing with Dark with the dude with what happened to his eye. Anyway, it's almost like a running gag. But basically, she was very heavily implying that Quark was put it into her contract that she had to have sex with him. I don't know. It could have been Umox because they kept being interrupted, but it was definitely something with sexual connotations. I'm pretty sure in the context of this scene, it was definitely sex. And, she kept saying how she just wanted to be working on his job, and that Quark kept advancing on her, and she kept saying him no, and eventually he, showed her a contract and say, see, it's in the contract. And she's so she went to Cisco about it. She's like, Cisco, I'm not a legal expert, so I didn't know to read the contract and look it over. And Cisco's like, well, I'm not a legal expert either, but no one on my station is going to do shit like that. We're paraphrasing. Basically what he said is I'm not going to let Quark get away with that. And that scene, I think, works. That is the kind of scene that really accurately portrays how despicable and misogynistic the Ferengi are. And again, this is season 1. This is the 4th or 5th episode, I think. So that I do buy for Quark's character, because that was before his character journey. So that makes total sense, and I think the way they played it was true, was accurate to the characters, that Quark is being a fucking despicable person. They didn't play it for laughs. They didn't have comedic music going dun 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 dun. No, they were Cisco's oh, that's despicable. I'm not gonna let him get away with that, which is the correct response. That's why Cisco is our hero. But here in this episode, they play it for jokes. But it gets even worse. It gets even worse because you have the ending of the episode where they come back to Dakota with the Dabo girl, and she goes to Quark and basically says, oh yeah, let's do it, I want to give you Umox. That is so disgusting in so many ways. I'm sorry, I've heard other people say you could tell this episode was written by men, and I don't think that is an inaccurate statement. I don't think, I wouldn't dispute that, really. That they really think that a young woman who's at a job, who her boss says, you have to give me whatever, back massager or hand job, or I'm going to fire you, that her response would be, oh, let's do it. I want to give you that hand job. That's despicable. I mean, from her reaction from the first part, it's very clear that she didn't have those feelings towards him, but she was being coerced into it. I mean, this is someone, and this is like the fakest writing ever, which is what I'm actually willing to go with, that it's misogynistic writing, or she's faking it and she doesn't actually, she's putting on an act because she's afraid of getting fired. And really, she just should have went to Siska like that other Dama girl did, but maybe she was scared. Maybe she didn't think it would work. And so she's cornered by this evil fucking troll that is Quark. Now, in the scene, of course, Quark is just coming back from his sex change, so he's still affected by the hormones. And he tells her no. You know, you shouldn't have to do that. Don't worry about it. Don't waste your time on that stuff. It was very wrong of me to suggest that. Which, you know, I guess it shows some character growth. But then she says, oh, that's a shame. I wanted to do it. Which, again, I already talked about how that's fucking disgusting that they would write it that way. But then Quark says, wait, what am I thinking? Why did T'Pella come back in? And again, they play it for laughs. That's supposed to be hilarious. Ha 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 ha. He wants to sexually harass her. Isn't that so funny? That is so damn funny. Why can't people see what's wrong with this episode? Now, I gotta mention the documentary. I looked for research on this to try to back up this statement, but I couldn't find anything. What the fuck is this guy talking about? So the documentary, What We Leave Behind, about Deep Space Nine, which was narrated by Ira Stephen Bear, the showrunner, the guy who thought this episode was hilarious. Anyway, they had the segment where they're talking about all the social commentary that Deep Space Nine made, and it was like, oh, the commentary on the poor with things past, and the commentary on having a military state with Homefront and stuff like that. And then they came to sexual identity and sexual orientation, and they had the episode Rejoin, which, okay, that makes sense. And they put a check by it, but then they had this like fourth wall breaking thing where they cut to Ira Stephen Bear in the editing room with the editor, and Ira Stephen Bear is like, no, take that check mark away. I don't think we earned it. We didn't do enough with gender politics or sexual identity because we should have made Garrett gay and all these sort of things, and we just didn't do enough. And so the editor tries to argue back with him and be like, no, you've done enough. Like, Rejoin was a great episode. And what about Prophet and Lace? That ages better than even did, that plays better now than it even did when it first aired. Give me a second. What the fuck is that guy talking about? What is he on about? And I tried to look this up. I tried to look up his name. I'm like, what's his reasoning here? I like really want to know what the fuck he's thinking. Okay, so first of all, this episode is not just me who hates it. It is despised by a lot of people. I looked up a lot of worst lists for Deep Space Nine. Now, granted, this wasn't always number one. It tended to be like number 4, most of all. If you go on IMDb, or their lowest rated list, this is the 4th lowest rated. And there was like that Vegas convention I mention all the time, where all fans voted for the worst Star Trek episodes of the entire franchise. And Prophet of the Lace did make that list. It wasn't number 1. And so basically, and I read a review, several reviews where people did say this was the worst episode of Deep Space Nine. So it's a reviled episode. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the video, there's always going to be detractors. There's a few people who think it's funny, but it's clear that's a minority opinion. So what the fuck is this guy on about? Like, this episode's despised. Why does he think that this is a great example for gender politics identity. Like, Rejoined, I think, is. Like, I did my whole hour review of Rejoined and how that's, like, a really great analogy to discrimination against LGBT community. And, but this isn't. Like, and it's actually offensive to the LGBT community. So, and to women as well. So I really, especially the whole sexual harassment bullshit, but I really don't get why he fucking said that. And the whole thing is, okay, it ages better now. Here's the thing. It ages way worse now than it was in the 90s. And even in the 90s, this episode was outdated the moment it came out. Like, the second it released, it was outdated. Because, and this is clear that they based this off of classical movies, like Some Like It Hot is the one that they mentioned a lot. I never saw that movie. I don't really care to. I hear it's actually decent, but I don't really care. And this episode came out in, late to mid 90s or mid to late 90s, where there were other cross-dressing comedy things like Mrs. Doubtfire and Tu Wong Fu and stuff like that. But the thing with, and I just watched this really good documentary on Netflix called oh god, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a Disclosure, I think, but it was about the portrayal of transgendered in movies and films, and how they were basically just played for jokes. They were just mocked and made fun of as, oh, isn't this funny? This man thinks he's the woman. That's hilarious. And that was actually really offensive to the transgender community. And there was a lot of transgender people who talked about how that kind of ruined their childhood, and it made them terrified to come out, to admit that they were transgender, because they would just be mocked and laughed at a joke. And this episode fucking contributes to that. Now, I can't really speak to Some Like It Hot or even Tootsie, because I think I hadn't seen that since I was 4 years old. But the stuff I saw in the 90s that did that, like particularly Mrs. Doubtfire, and you had the whole thing with the crying game where the guy threw up. Oh my god, it's transgendered. Oh, that's so disgusting, and he's going to throw up. Like, that contributes to this this mocking. And this episode totally does, because it completely tries to play it for laughs. Oh, isn't it so funny? Quark is trying to dress up like a woman, trying to act like a woman. He's giving a sex change to be a woman. Ha ha ha! That's so funny. You don't see how offensive that it would be to the transgender community. Now, more than that, just looking at it, first of all, okay, so Bashir, they mentioned in passing that Bashir gave Quark a sex change. Really? Again, Bashir's completely out of character. Why the fuck would Bashir agree to do this? Like, Quark, okay, so you imagine the Ferengi and Quark, and Quark's like, I need a sex change. And he's like, oh, Bashir would be like, oh, so you identify as a woman, and you need to, well, there's a long process you should go to, let me have some therapy. He's like, no, I don't identify with a woman, I just want to pretend to be a woman for a week so I can trick this Sluggo Cola guy to giving Ferengis women rights. And Bashir is like, okay, sure, whatever. No, he fucking wouldn't be. He'd be like, Quark, get the fuck out of here. Bashir wouldn't fucking agree to do this. This is bullshit. And another thing I want to make clear is that Quark is not transgendered. As I said, transgendered, that would be a man who actually identifies as a woman, and so is a woman, and wants to have a sex change so her appearance can match her inner identity. Which is not, again, that's not with Quark. He just wants to fucking trick someone. And here's something else that was pointed out to me that I didn't really think about when I watched this episode. That basically what this episode is saying is that, so the only way the women of Ferenginar could stop being oppressed and gain their rights, rights to wear clothes, and to work jobs and whatever, and be treated more like equals. And I think they make it clear that they're not going to be exactly treated like equals, but they're going to gain steps in that direction. And the only way they could do this is by a man pretending to be a woman in order to prove that women were just as equal as men, when really he wasn't, because it wasn't actually a woman, it was just a man pretending to be a woman. Profit and lace, ladies and gentlemen. This is the really progressive episode that fucking editor was talking about, that ages even better now than it did before. I really want to get that guy in a room and be like, okay, please give me your reasoning here. I know it will be a bunch of bullshit. Why would anyone say that? I don't understand. It's one of the mysteries that I'm going to take to my grave that's always going to baffle me. What the fuck was he thinking? Anyway. Do you want to talk about the attempted rape of Quark? Fine, let's talk about that. So, and again, this is why it doesn't age well, and this is why it was already outdated this fucking second that it aired. It has this scene where the Sluggo Cola guy, oh, again, that's so hilarious. Ha ha ha. Anyway, the Sluggo Cola guy is sexually harassing and trying to rape Quark. Is like chasing her around the room and being like, "Oh, you're so pretty," and throwing stuff at her, and he's like, literally like holding him back with a chair, and he's still advancing on her or him, because it's not really a transgender, it's just Quark. He's advancing on him, trying to have sex with him. He's raping her. He said that's attempted rape. And it's played for total laughs. And again, there's no way this could have been directed that would have made it any better. As it's written, it's terrible. Ha ha ha! He wants to rape her. Isn't that funny? Now, the reason why I say it's outdated is because, again, I've never seen something like it all. But I know from like Pepe Le Pew and stuff from the Looney Tunes that they have. And it was more acceptable in like the 40s and 50s to have like these rapey characters being like, oh, and they play it for laughs, that they're really trying to force someone against their will. That Pepe Le Pew stuff really doesn't age. And so I know that they're trying to play it that way, but it comes off as really, really rapey. And it's even, again, it ages better. It ages much worse. And then Brunt shows up. Oh my god. This episode is just so terrible. So Brunt shows up and tries to say that that's actually a man. And she's like, oh, I'm a woman. So she kisses, it's just Quark, kisses Sluggo Cola guy, and Brunt's appalled. He's like, he's appalled and disgusted because two men are kissing. Or I'm not going to call Quark transgender, because he's not. He had a sex change, but he did it to trick someone. So it's a man, and he's kissing another man, and Brunt's disgusted by this. Two men kissing. What could be more disgusting? Isn't it such a progressive episode? Wow, this episode ages so well. It really has something to say about the LGBT community in a positive way. What the fuck is wrong with that editor guy? What the hell is wrong with him? That is so homophobic and offensive. How could he not see that? How could anyone not see that? So, next, Brunt still doesn't buy. He's still insisting that it's a man, and Sluggo Cola guy is like, oh, I'm not too sure. And so then Quark takes off his shirt and reveals his breast. You know what? What this reminds me of? That documentary I'm talking about, I think it's called Disclosure. they talked about this movie. One of the guys that came out in the 80s. This is about a woman pretending to be a man. I don't think she was transgender either. She was just like a reporter doing it for a story. But anyway, she was pretending to be a man, and she tried to, when she told us she had a best friend, this guy, but she started to fall in love with him. And when she told him, like, look, I love you, or kissed him or something, he's like, oh, you're gay, that's fine. She's like, no, I'm not gay, I'm a woman. And he did, no, you're not. And so the way he had to take off her shirt and reveal her breasts. And they talked about in that documentary how fucking stupid that is. How unrealistic that is to come out to someone to be like, no one actually... And how, like, offensive that is that they have to actually show the breast to prove, like anyone would actually show their, like, genitals or private parts to prove their sexual, their gender or sexual identity or anything like that is really dumb and offensive. And guess what, guys? That's exactly what this episode does. It does the exact thing. Almost, I would argue, I would make the very strong argument, and a lot worse of a context too. That because Quark's just trying to trick this guy into giving women the rights they deserve. And oh yeah, I didn't mention that Quark manages to trick the guy into giving women the rights they deserve by seducing him, by kissing him, and being sexually attractive. What a progressive episode, guys. Isn't this like the best thing ever? This is so great for the LGBT. Okay. Now, I don't like Mrs. Doubtfire. I never liked any of those films that really, because the reason why is because they really play with gender stereotypes. Let's forget about the whole thing about, sexual gender identity and all that. Let's just erase that, and let's just talk about like gender stereotypes, like, oh, men are like this, men are for Mars and women are for Venus, and oh, women walk like that. And they have a couple of scenes like that where Ron is like, oh, this is how you walk like a woman, and he sits like, this is how you sit on the chair with your head, and like fucking women don't sit like that. I mean, that's such a gross stereotype. It's unbelievable. I've always been against that kind of shit. Mainly because, like, I never fit those male stereotypes, and many women that I met didn't fit these female stereotypes. Like, I remember when I was married, I would often, like, when I'd hear about, oh, this is what the husbands, this is what all men are like, and this is what all women are like, and many of them, not all, but many of those gender stereotypes were, like, swapped. Like, the female ones fit me better, and the male ones fit her better. And so, I mean, that's just one example of how all this gender identity, I thought was, or gender stereotypes, not identity, I'm sorry, these gender stereotypes I thought were just total horseshit. And all these movies like Mrs. Doubtfire and this and all this other bullshit, it plays on that, and it ups it. Oh, women go, oh yeah. And I talked about in like Turnabout Intruder, for example, when they had a woman in Kirk's body, and now, oh, this filing his nails, see, it's a woman, get it? Like, I hate that. I think that's bullshit. I think it's offensive, actually, to stereotype women in that way, to have around being, oh, this, and have Quark be like, oh, and outplay the whole femininity. I think it's gross stereotype. It's not generalization, it's stereotyping, and it's offensive. I hate it. I hate it. I hate everything about this episode. It is so horribly written. It is not funny. It was terribly acted. The script is just so horrible. The actors didn't know what to do with it. They tried to save it, but the writers were like, no, let's make it funny. It's offensive. They have sexual harassment and they play for jokes. They have attempted rape and they play for jokes. They mock transgender community, they mock the gay community, they mock women. This episode is terrible. Nothing about it is good. It's fucking Ferengis, and the Ferengis aren't funny, and who gives a fuck about the Ferengis? I don't care about Brun. I don't care about anything about this episode. This episode gets a 1! The worst! Because it is the worst episode of the entire Star Trek franchise. There's nothing that's worse than this. This is just the worst example you could possibly get of a giant piece of shit. These writers should have all been fired for this. Ira Stephen Bear should have been fired for this episode. Fucking God damn it! Sorry, I had to get that on my system. Anyway, that is it for my review of Profit and Lace, and that is it for my top 10 worst episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise. Thank you guys so much. Hope I didn't hurt your ears too much, and I hope you don't mind for profanity. If not, you can fuck off. No, just kidding. But seriously, fuck off. No. But sorry. Hope you don't mind profanity. Hope you don't mind yelling, but I'm sorry. This episode really invokes that in me, and that's what I would get by talking about this. But anyway, those are my 10 worst episodes. I know there's a lot missing. I talked about some in the intro. You're like, oh, what about Move Along Home? What about Threshold? Well, watch my intro. I explained why I didn't put those episodes in there. This is what it's it for me, guys. Those 10 episodes. Anyway, guys is a gender neutral term, just by the way. But anyway, oh, this fucking episode. Anyway, that's it for my review. That's it for my top 10 worst. Thanks for watching. Thanks so much for sticking through all this. And be sure to check out my channel for many more Star Trek reviews where I'm going to get back to watching good episodes now. After watching the 10 worst episodes, forcing myself to watch these 10 worst episodes, I need to watch something good. I really need to watch something good again. And the things I do, I hope you appreciate watching these 10 terrible episodes for you, so you don't have to. Anyway, be sure to check out my channel for many more reviews on Star Trek and other shows like Lower Decks, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.